Welcome everybody to today's live cast. My name is Tim Ruswick. I'm with Rick Davidson. Today we're going to talk about game development and a lot of other things, but specifically we're going to show you two different games that require low brain power. We're going to go through the design of them. We're going to talk about what makes them work, what's good about them, what we don't like about them, if there's anything. And we're going to kind of talk about the philosophy behind kind of games that like maybe aren't as complex as super strategy games, and who they're for and how they work and how you can design some good ones as well. So, Rick, do you want to start with your game? Or should I start with my game?
You start with yours. I'm going to start by complaining about how bad my green screen is today. So if you're out there and you're like, why has Rick got a green halo around him and why is there things kind of pixelated? I don't know. Poor old Tim had to endure me for 5 minutes twiddling with my lights on the green screen. So there we go. How's that for low brain power? I'm also only just awake, so I've prepared nicely for low brain power, Tim. I literally have low brain power at the moment, as opposed to usual where I have medium brain power.
Perfect. This is gonna be great for you then. I want to share a game called Super Auto Pets. Okay. And I saw this on Steam.
Is it a clicker game, Tim? It kind of smells like a clicker game.
It's not a clicker game. It's not a clicker game.
They are low brain power.
I saw this on Steam for a bunch of times, and then finally I went ahead and downloaded it, and now I've downloaded it on every single device I own because it's amazing. I'm going to walk you guys through how the game works real quick, and then we're going to talk about the design. So first of all, I'm just going to click Arena Mode, and basically what it does is it sets me up with these 3 pets in the shop area. This is another shop item. And then I've got 10 coins.
Is it a turn-based game? Turn-based.
It's sort of a turn-based game. I'll show you. So
turn-based games.
Basically, I've got 10 coins, and each one of these costs a number of coins. They're each 3 right now, but they all have a different effect. And the effect is dependent on the other animals you have in your line and or the positions that you're in their line. So I'm going to go ahead and take the cricket. I'm going to put him up
Tim.
front.
So far, I'm having to pay attention. I don't know where the low brain power comes in.
Well, the low brain power comes in just a second. So
there's
then
numbers for me to consider. I think my game is going to be more low brain power than yours. I think.
But check this out. I'm going to hit end turn, and I'm going to end turn with excess gold.
That took
and
some
now
brain power.
It finds someone else randomly, and it just makes our pets fight each other. That's all.
Okay. Oh, that was it.
I don't do anything. I don't touch anything, and they just fight automatically.
Okay, I think maybe you do win. Picking your things in the...
So that's the entire game. But the game is interesting because it's all about the positioning of each one of these units, right? So this one at the start of battle, it puts the last enemy 1 space forward. So, but if you do that on an enemy, for example, it could change the order of their squad, and the order of their squad could change your strategy. So it takes some thought, like to position your squad. So this guy, he summons 1 cricket when he faints, which means that when he dies, he adds another cricket, which is cool. And then so I'm not saying any super strategy right now here, but basically there's different like synergies and stuff like that. And these in arena mode, I believe these change every like month or 2 as well, which is super cool. So honey, it gives 1 pet honey, summon a 1/1 after fainting. So right now this guy summons 1 cricket. I can drag the honey on him, and now he'll summon a cricket and a bee when he dies. And I'll just show you guys this real quick. And this is like a tier 2 battle. So watch when he dies. Boom. Okay, so he's got some abilities that attack the back of my row first, but now it summoned the bee, it summoned the cricket, and then so on and so forth. So I lost that battle.
You didn't live.
No, but so then every turn, when you reach turn 3, you kind of go up in tiers, and then you get better, more powerful pets that do different things. So this game is like super chill. It takes like no thought at all. Well, it takes some strategy and planning, but then really you just kind of watch what happens, right? You just kind of watch the game unfold. And I used to hate games like this. I really used to hate games that were like kind of idle, kind of clicker, kind of like low brain power. But really what's happened over the last couple of years is I don't know if my brain capacity has reduced or my workload has increased. One of the two. But I really enjoy these like lighter games now. And like this is on my iPad, for example. It's also on my phone. And it's cool to just kind of jump into and 2, like even right now I'm on 1 out of 10 wins. If you get to 10 wins, then you kind of like win the game. But I can save this at any point and pick up on another device, and it's just super cool. The other thing that I really like about this is the enemies that you fight, they are other people's configurations at that tier. So it's sort of multiplayer, but it's like asynchronous multiplayer. So you don't have to do all the hard multiplayer stuff. You can just kind of grab a quick spreadsheet of somebody else's pets and put them in the right place.
Right on.
So I'm gonna sell this guy, and I'm gonna Flamingo gives the 2 nearest friends behind +1 attack and +1 health. So I'm gonna add this, and so now when he faints, he's gonna buff these 2 guys.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to challenge. There's some comments in the chat as well about from Lottie. I don't think Tim can actually do low brain power with his strategy affinity. I agree a little bit on that. I'm looking at this and you're like, well, this guy has a such and such, but then if you're this guy and that guy, but then you get to do one of these, but it's really easy because you just click a button and it's nothing to it. It's like, dude, I'm worn out already. And I think testament to the fact that it's not low brain power is I was talking nonsense and you were not in the mood. You're like, I'm focusing on my thing here and shut up. So I think with low brain power, you'd be like, pew, 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 back to me. So like, do we need to get into a half-hour definition conversation about what is low brain power gaming, or is that not quite what we're here for today?
So, I like 4X strategy games or like Civ games or like hardcore games that you have to dedicate your life to generally. So this is definitely, and in the strategy sphere, this is a low brain power game for sure. Like this is a low power strategy game. Now strategy games by definition usually have a higher brain power type of, allotment to their genre. So while this may not be like this is not the same as like some of the other games in my library. Like I definitely have auto battlers and stuff like that, but it's compared to the strategy games I usually play. It's low brain power.
Can you play another game for us while we're chatting so we can?
So watch my strats now. So when he dies, he spawns 2 guys, and then when he dies, he buffs these 2 guys.
Oh, so if you have that guy with this guy, but not that guy, and then he joins with this guy, and if you're against that guy, then this guy. That sounds like thinking.
You're getting it,
I'm hearing some thinking in this, my friend.
Yes. Okay. Pigs sell to game.
I like it.
No,
I like it. I like that you deliberately gave me something to talk about. I appreciate that.
Give 1 pet +2 health. See, we can buff this guy for health. We can give him a peach, and then when shop food is bought, he gains +1. So if I buy this again for him, then he gets another +1. See, there's strats to this, but it's a very light strategy game. The other thing that I like about this too is like a lot of strategy games will have units that do multiple things. Like especially if you play like XCOM, your unit has like 5 or 10 abilities. Every single one of these pets only has 1 ability. That's all they have. They just do one thing, right?
Yeah.
So let's.
Sorry, man. I didn't mean to torment you. I heard the sigh just now. Did everyone else hear the sigh? You're like, fuck.
I'm like, the guys don't like my favorite games. What am I gonna do?
Oh no, we like it. We're just teasing you about how low brain power. I'm ready for you to give it back to me when I'm showing you my low.
You're just low like speaking of low brain power, I'll show you a low brain power game. So it's
1. Oh, look at you dominating 6-5. Oh wait, no. That was damage.
I just
damage
that was them.
Well, you kind of, whatever the case, you don't seem to be very good at this game. Am I allowed to say that without sounding rude?
I'm not good at it, but I like that it's super light compared to what I usually play, and I can kind of chill out and relax. The other thing too that's really important is the pace of the game. That's what I want to point out for this too, because it's not just about how much thought goes into it, but it's also the pace at which thought goes into it. So there's a lot of hardcore shooters and games that have strategy to it, but they might, for example, require you to make those decisions on a split second, right? Yeah. They might force you to do it in the moment. So I can take as long as I want to make these decisions.
I think that's a good thing for us to debate a little bit, because if you're making a reaction in the moment, then that's, to me, is low brain power. You just you're going with that more subconscious reaction brain, which is just like, okay, shoot there, shoot there, shoot there, shoot there. That I don't think requires as much brain power as the slow thinking, where you're sitting there and saying, shall I pair this one with that one? Is that going to be the best strategy? So there's also, I think, probably interesting conversation about fast thinking and slow thinking, and which one you want to create for your player. So I'll bring this back to game design as indie game developers, not just reviewing games. But when you're creating a new game, do you want to have a mixture of those two things, or do you want to just make a reaction-based game where someone feels clever, but it's because they're being like pew 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 pew, as opposed to this style of game where you don't need to have reaction time. So old people like myself are okay. It's not like Twitch based and I'm too slow because I'm too old. But I can get there and say, it's because of my superior cerebellum or cerebrum, whichever is applicable, or hippocampus, or one of those, that I'm actually doing well in this instance.
So I think I've got a little bit different of a perspective here. So like games that I have to make constant quick judgments, they give me anxiety. Like it stresses me out. Like I can clearly, like I feel it in my chest. I feel like I don't like generally those kind of games because they I feel it. I can't really describe it. I feel like I'm pressured too much and I don't like the pressure. So with that, while they technically might require less brain power because it's more intuition versus like thought and strategy, they add a level of anxiety to me, especially like competitive multiplayer games. I used to be really into them, but now like my brother always wants to play them with me and he just wants to dominate the other team. And it's like, that's not fun for me to go into a game and like worry about the win and constantly try to play at my best pace and do all that. Whereas like this, even though it does require thought, the pacing allows me to like, I can make all of these micro decisions, and I can make these micro decisions on the couch, watching a TV show, pausing for 10 minutes between decisions, watching something, getting distracted, all that stuff too. Whereas I feel like those games require my constant attention for that 18 minutes or whatever that match length is.
I think a really important part of a game's design is that someone is always cognizant of how can I lose? And it's only because of my decisions or my skill that I can win. I think they're the best type of games. If it's 100% luck, you pull the slot machine handle, then you can trick yourself into thinking that I was responsible for that, or I made a choice, or I won because of me. But so those sorts of gambling, just push a button and whatever, don't have that element, but they do have very strongly you can lose, and you have you can lose or you could win. And I think that's a foundation that that they build upon, and they have the bright sparkly ding ding, wow, well done if you actually win. So it's tugging on the part of someone's emotion, which is I could lose, wow, I won. And so I think that could lose, could win is really important. And then so you've got a continuum of, I think, of that as a game designer. If you're doing a really aggressive roguelike, then you might want to have the I could lose really in someone's face the whole time. A game like Flappy Bird, I think, had tons of success, because of some publicity, but because of you flap once or twice, you hit the post, and then you lose straight away. So it's very present. You can lose right in your face. And that feeling of, let's see if I can beat my friend by getting a score of 10 is also present as well, or try to beat my previous best score. So that win-lose, if you can have that in the player's face, it can often make the game more enjoyable. But as Tim's talking about, if it's a game where you don't feel like you're in control, and it's like, you don't know what you're doing, or this is really hard, or we're going to take controls away, but you could lose, that can create too much stress. So you want to ask yourself, do I want to have just a little bit of stress or a lot of stress? And all of those are valid, in a game, I think.
What's interesting too is even multiplayer games, some people winning means more to them than others. So like when I do play competitive multiplayer games with my brother, I have such a better time when we're just relaxing and talking and shooting people in Halo than like trying to actually win.
Yeah.
So like, and winning has never really mattered to me much at all. It matters to him a lot. So playing it's kind of hard for us to find overlaps of games that we like sometimes because it's so important to him, and I'm just there for the experience to hang out with him too. So the player types matter on the games that you're trying to implement and create.
Well, I think as well, this is why like good matchmaking really revolutionized the way online multiplayer games worked. Way back in the day, where you just sort of played whoever was available. You'd play a schmuck who's terrible and you destroy them, and you're like, nah, no challenge. You'd play someone who's amazing and you'd get destroyed, and you're like, oh, that was no fun. So good matchmaking, the goal of it is to have that you win 50% of the time, you lose 50% of the time. So you stay in this kind of, and as you get better as a player, then you can level up, and you might get ranked up and you're not quite ready to face them, so you lose a bit more, and you kind of you find the spot you settle into. And I think that's a really important part of the process, to say, what, when I play this game, this competitive multiplayer game, I've at least got a 50% shot at winning if I play well.
Right. I 100% agree with that. Good matchmaking is kind of one of the hallmarks of modern games, for sure. Start a battle. Okay. Rick, are you ready to show off your game? Because I'm getting too into this.
I am so ready.
You're gonna lose me.
Let me get it teed up here.
All right, let's do one more battle. Well, let's give people cupcakes.
Boink. Are you gonna let me go full screen? No, hang on. Let me just see if I can get it. Display window full screen. Here we go. Now, if anyone has seen this particular game, I'd love to. No, it's an older game, and it's in a particular. Oh, I've lost the.
Let's see what Rick thinks is.
Hang on, before you don't share yet. Oh no, too early. It's minimized. It is Iron Snout.
Iron Snout. I've never heard of this before.
Iron Snout. You'll know the genre when you see me playing it. So for me, when Tim and I were talking about this yesterday, I was saying, okay, what's low brain power for me? Low brain power is the opposite of what Tim went to, which is strategy, but without deadlines and without too much strategy. I went to just mash the buttons. That was for me. So I'm on the whatever. Well, I've only got one character. I don't think I've unlocked anyone else. Santa Pig. Start game. We will play in which mode? Classic mode, sudden death mode. We'll play in classic mode. Okay, so fight. I've got to hide that thing. Oh, dang. Wrong button. Okay. Fight. Okay, so it's a genre of game where you're just tapping left or right.
This art style is beautiful.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? You can jump, you can right, you can down, do a low kick, you can do a punch. There's combos. I'm just tapping right, left, up, and down on the keyboard. So up and boom, down, stop.
So you can't move at all? You're just stuck in the middle?
Can't move at all. Basically, my decisions here are, do I go left or right? You can pick up all these little items as they come along. And do I go tap, 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 or do I go tap a little bit, whoop, jump? So there's a little bit of reaction-based brain power in terms of this guy's coming in. If he throws that thing, I jumped and that was a bad move to do. What's he doing? So I can duck under the thing. I've got this hitty stick. You can only use the hitty stick things once. Poo, poo, poo. Right, right, right. I wish I had my keys on the screen so you could see what I was pushing. But it's really just right, up, down. Well, you guys know how these things.
This is amazing. Work. I love the death animations too. How they their hat falls off in there. And
then it's obviously as I go on, it's going to get more intense. I'm playing in. I think I've got health up in the top left. There's a couple of different modes here. And I think this speaks a little bit to extending the life of your game, not just having the one mode, but there's a mode which is sudden death. So if you get hit once, then you die. There's a mode where you've got a certain amount of time, and you've got to try to do something. Oh no, you've got to try to kill 100 enemies, and it records your time. This is more of a just go for as long as you can and see how many you can get up to. So I'm up to 27 as my score. These Miley Cyrus is on the wrecking ball. I think it's literally supposed to be Miley Cyrus. Did you pick that one?
Dave asks, are there special moves from certain combos, or?
You get a. I don't think so. I don't know. That shows how much brain power I'm putting into it. I'm just kind of hitting, and I know there's combos. Duck, Miley, and there's combos, but I haven't seen any sort of outcome from that. Obviously, as things get more intense, there's more dudes coming in. Skateboard. Yeah, look at that one. That ninja kick. That's very. Who's the guy who does that? The action hero, Jean-Claude Van Damme, does the double spready in the air.
Someone said they love the bacon health bar. I didn't even notice it was bacon, but that's amazing.
Okay, I'll deliberately play poorly so I can perish, and then I can show you one of the other modes. Bang,
I'm
bang.
really in love with this art style. Like this is very much
Awesome.
like my art style, and I love it. It's more
Treat.
detailed than my art style.
Actually, I should probably start with the tutorial so that you can see the moves. I should have done this first of all. You can hit left, boom. So it gives you this nice little tutorial. This is a great way to do a tutorial. It's just hit the things by doing the moves.
Oh, you
we
can
tell
hold down and go left to right. So, okay, so you've got... Oh, there is combos. Sort of.
Oh, that's... Well, that was a kind of a spinny kick in the air. So that was just starting. Now it starts. This is a great way to do a tutorial, something we can learn from that. It was just literally not, you know, hey, here are the keys you can move, but do this key to hit this thing, do this key to hit this thing. And okay, that was awesome. I'm just going to die here so I can go into one of the other modes.
Josh says, after seeing Rick try to talk about his game, I think Tim was right. Low brain power equals low attention required. I think we were both right, to be clear. Yeah. I think Rick had a really good point that the the strategy was more thought than I had realized because I'm so used to playing strategy games. But the attention is also another important thing to keep in mind with how much energy it takes. Maybe low brain power is the bad word, but because sometimes it takes energy without brain power.
Maybe thinking is the better word to use. Like I'm really not thinking here at all. I'm just reacting.
Yeah.
So this is for me. This is just 100% purely a reaction game, and you can improve your skills by reacting better or recognizing the patterns. So this guy here, I don't have to duck him. That thing I have to duck. So you recognize the patterns over time. Well, that Pokeball lasted a while. Yeah, so low brain power is maybe that's a little bit. Wow. Okay, so there we go. Is there anything else you want to see about this game, Tim? I feel like I've explored the essence of it.
Is there any other modes that you haven't messed with?
Not anything of significance. Oh, there's different backgrounds, but they're not unlocked. So, I mean, there's some cool ways to extend the game. You look at it, it's very simple. After a while, it could feel very samey. So, different backgrounds, that becomes, it's a very, very easy feature to implement. But that cosmetic can give the player a reason. I just want to get the next background. That's cool.
What's that pirate level in the bottom left? Is that a DLC?
Oh, yeah. Now with pirates. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
The fact, okay, I think this is awesome though that games like this exist, right? Because for a long time, I really didn't consider a lot of like the super basic, simple stuff games. Like I thought games should try to push, the decisions and try to make people really engaged. But I've really started to realize over the last few years that like sometimes there is an allure or like something interesting about playing games that don't require a ton of energy or brain power, and it's almost a meditative sort of thing. The other part of that too that I think is really cool with a game like this, or honestly a game like Super Auto Pets too, is that like you don't really need audio for it at all. So you can listen to a podcast, or you can watch TV, or you can do something else while playing the game. I've noticed personally, I really, really enjoy podcasts, but I've also noticed that podcasts don't stimulate me enough to just listen to them. I have to do something else like while I'm listening to them, but I can't do something too brain intensive or I miss the entire podcast.
Yeah, so, if you're driving or walking or out and about or in the garden or something, then podcasts can be really amazing from that point of view. But if you're just sitting on your couch listening to a podcast,
it's a little weird.
It's a bit slow, I find. Podcast. Well, I mean, some may argue this conversation we're having fits into that same realm. Like, I can watch you guys, but not if I'm doing nothing else, because, oh my goodness. Yeah.
How about low agency versus high agency? The more agency... Hold on, so let me feature this comment. The more agency you have over your character and the way you interact with the world, the more brain power the game takes, question mark. I don't think it's just about decisions though, because I think the pacing of the decisions matter, and the gravity of making those decisions. So like, for example, Rick can make a lot of bad decisions when trying to hit people, and they don't have a huge, gravely horrible effect. Right? Like if you miss a guy or he hits you, that's arguably a bad decision in the game, right? but
Yeah.
it's not like an end all be all decision that will end your entire run that took you 8 hours to make, right?
If you're on the one hit, one kill thing, or the sudden death, then it can, you make one mistake. But here
Right.
I'm literally just mashing left and right on the buttons. I'm just whoever feels closer, and the game's forgiving. The game lets me do that.
Right.
It's not trying to trick me. Basically, it's saying so long as you hit a guy within whatever half a second of him standing next to you, then you're
Right.
okay.
Yeah, so the
But then,
quantity of decisions matter, but I
oi,
think
oi, oi.
also the gravity of the decisions matter. So roguelikes have this problem, for example, because a lot of roguelikes, it ends your entire run when you die, which means you have to start the game over. But the
Yeah.
length of that game makes a big difference in how that feels. So if you've been playing that roguelike, like XCOM is a good example. If you've been playing that for 12 hours, you're 12 hours into a game, losing and starting over feels absolutely horrible, right? But like if you've been playing that run for just 10 minutes, then you're like, okay, I'll start over again. It's fine. So it is about quantity, but it's also about the gravity of these decisions and the what actually happens when you go wrong and kind of the loss of progress, if that makes sense. So that's one of the things I like about Super Auto Pets too. Losing, it doesn't really matter in a sense. Like
Yeah.
in order to get eliminated, you have to get, I think it's 3 losses anyway, and then
Hmm.
you were only like 5 wins into the 10 anyway, so it doesn't, it's kind of like I don't really care if I win or lose. I just like the strategy of finding the different units and how they interact.
I I think as well, different games, different genres, but different games certainly have a different role for a player. So the game I was playing just then is a 10 minutes of just silly hitting and see if I can get a better score. I find that relaxing because I find that the mindlessness of it is me just kind of getting into the zone and just hit. Oh, this is kind of
Right.
fun, and appreciating the nifty characters and the explosions, etc. So if you're making a game that's for that particular moment in a player's life, then be very present to that and make it for that. If you're making a deep strategy game that you're like, okay, my player's got a couple of hours, they're looking to really immerse themselves in a universe, really think deeply about something, then make a game for that. Sometimes I think we enter into that without thinking of that. Who's it for? When we think about who's it for, but not when's it for. So we can accidentally try to be making a shooter that each gameplay run takes 3 hours and requires so much time investment, but the
Right.
actual mechanics are kind of quick and throwaway and fun and quirky. So I think we need to plan all those things together. And part of the reason I wanted to show you Iron Snout is that sort of game is totally within the capability of a fairly intermediate
Totally.
indie game developer. That could be your first game. The kind of well, I see it as a stickman game because that's where I first started playing these games. But the stand in the middle and just hit the enemies coming in sort of game, we can all make that with a little bit of research and a bit of learning. We can make that style of game, and then the challenge becomes making it compelling and interesting visually. That's the hard part, I
Totally.
think. Um,
Totally.
but
So
but it's within
Lottie
our reach.
asks, I think low brain power is about anxiety reduction versus anxiety boosting. Can you still make a high anxiety, low brain power game? Well, I think that's kind of been the discovery here is I hadn't really thought of it in those terms, but like I think you can. Someone brought up, or you brought up Flappy Bird earlier, Rick. I think that is a high anxiety, low brain power game, right? Because the longer you get, the bigger that loss is, right? Because of how difficult it is to get past every pipe as you tap. So that loss means that you have to completely start over and your score goes to 0. So I think it kind of grows. The other thing is,
Yeah.
I think this sudden death mode on the game you just showed is a high anxiety, low brain power game if you're trying to make it far, right? With one hit, you completely die. So I think it can kind of add to the anxiety level because that loss and the gravity of that loss is higher when you have only kind of one
So
hit.
if we look at what increases anxiety, in a game, I would say not knowing what to do, that increases anxiety. And the worst sort of anxiety is where the players don't understand how to play the game. How do I move the character? Like, how do I get out of this screen? Or who's that thing? Why is this happening? So that's the worst kind of anxiety where unless you're deliberately calling your game you don't know what to do in this game. Players generally don't like that kind of feeling. Then there's the sort of anxiety where you know what to do, but you're not sure if you're capable of doing it.
Right.
And I think that's a good anxiety to have in moments, maybe not the entire time, but in moments. There's also the sort of anxiety, which is I'm really close to my goal and I'm about to enter in something where I don't know if I'm going to be able to complete this thing. The boss can be very anxious because you've gone through the whole level. You're like, done it, done it, done it, done it.
Did we lose Rick? No. Well, I'm gonna fit.
Goodness.
Are you there?
Oh, internet's going wonky.
Wonka wonk.
Am I frozen?
A little bit. You're freezing, but I completely agree with you. Like, I think the boss fights are very usually like high anxiety kind of moments in the game, but I think good game designers understand the ebb and flow and the balance of that anxiety. So really good game designs have high anxiety moments followed by low anxiety moments, and then high anxiety moments, and the curve doesn't look straight, it looks looped. So like low anxiety moments and then high anxiety moments, low anxiety moments again, but higher than the previous low, if that makes sense. So it kind of builds in anxiety over time, and it gets you used to that anxiety, so you're kind of there.
Yeah.
I definitely struggled with this with my game Philophobia because I built a very high anxiety game, and I didn't really understand the gravity of what I was doing until after I launched it. So my game was based on the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Stage 2 was anger. And I really kind of took that design to heart, and I tried to make all the levels very angry and very anxiety inducing. But what I didn't realize is that the difficulty on stage 2 had ramped up significantly, and then it dropped off again after stage 3. So the game felt really unbalanced, and as a result, it actually bounced a lot of people at stage 2 because it was just too big of, especially at the boss fight. The boss fight was just insane, and there's no other boss that's harder than it. So it's really weird to have the hardest boss in the middle of your game. And I didn't really I was going from a like artistic emotional expression of what that felt like, but in reality, game design wise, I kind of made an unbalanced game just because I didn't really understand the ebb and flow of the decisions and stuff like that. So it's definitely the anxiety level of the decisions that you make the player take are super important, and where it is in the general experience is super important too.
Yeah, and I think don't be afraid to make the player super anxious, but you've got to own it. And you've got to tell the player that's what you're going to do. So if they know it's a roguelike, then they're not going to be upset when they're on level 2 and they just get one shot killed out of nowhere. They're like, what the heck happened there? Because they know that's going to happen in the game. This is why I like Risk of Rain 2 that we played a couple of weeks ago, is although I despise that out of nowhere, it's just one of the big guys get a critical hit on you and just poof, out of nowhere, just gone. I'm like, that seems unfair. But that's the reason I like playing this game, because I know at any point in time, if I'm not quite perfect with how I'm playing, I could just be like smited from nowhere. So that brings the joy. If you don't have any consequences, it's no fun. And a contrary point to that, there was a bug in the game. I'd been playing multiplayer with 2 other people, and you get a certain number of items. If there's more people, there's more items. And then we stopped playing, but I continued playing single player, but I still had the same number of items available. So the game was a little harder, but way more generous with items. And after a couple of levels, I was a god. I couldn't die. And I kept playing because I was thinking, I want to see how far I can go or what else is coming up. But I was so bored. I couldn't die in the game. And I was just like, bang, bang, you're all just exploded.
Right.
And the game lost all meaning. So I think it's really important for players to feel vulnerable in your game, because that gives it the purpose.
Well, like you always say too, Rick, like you want between 2 and 5 decisions at any point in your game. And I think the problem with being overpowered or being a god is there's no more real viable decisions at all, right? Because you're like already overpowered, and so you don't have to make trade-offs. You don't have to make interesting decisions. Should I take health or damage, right? Because it's like I always take damage because my health is just unbeatable. So it takes away the intrigue from a lot of the decisions that you're making, and as a result, it's just you lose interest because there's no more interesting decisions to be made.
It's important to be vulnerable, because then you can be clever to overcome that vulnerability.
Right.
And
I think every good decision has trade-offs, right? Like, and if you don't have trade-offs with your decision, like that's why in RPGs, a lot of people make the mistake of when they're building like an RPG game, they'll be like, here's a sword and it's like what you have, except it's +5 attack. It's like, is that really a decision though? Because like, why would you not equip that? It's +5 attack. But if it's like, do you want the one you have that has fire damage, or do you want this one that has ice damage? right? Because then you're like, oh, well, there's different what kind of enemies am I fighting? What zone am I entering? Like, there are
Yeah.
trade-offs, right? It might do more damage to these guys, but less damage to these guys. So the trade-offs of a decision makes it interesting. Whereas if it's always an upgrade, it's less interesting because it's not really a decision. It's just kind of like a chore to just equip the thing because you have no choice to do it.
Again, in Risk of Rain 2, there's a class of items where you get a good thing, but you also get a negative consequence. So an example of that is you pick up a thing and it gives you double damage but half health. And so I think that allows you to, as a player, allows you to feel, wow, I'm powerful, but I'm really vulnerable. It's actually accentuating that dynamic. And I don't pick up any of those because I'm not yet at the point where I've exhausted all of the joy in the core game. But that's a way to give some extension to your game, to give the game you were playing before. If you had it, okay, you've got one character, but they've got, superpowers. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe you've got lots and lots of character slots, but they're all super weak. So, not giving that as part of the regular gameplay, but giving it as an exception so people can go and find that and have a bit of like, whoa, after 20 hours of playing this game, I've now got this mode that's just insane. I think it's very interesting.
Totally. People are bringing up Celeste and Celeste's accessibility options in chat.
Oh, I hit a wall in Celeste. I'm like, this game's kind of fun. I like it. Then all of a sudden, how the heck do you jump over? I can't do it. Am I missing something? Am I useless?
I think Celeste's accessibility options are what made that game accessible. So this was the mistake that I made too, is I made a very difficult game. And then I just said, it's difficult, deal with it. Right. But Celeste and a couple games, like, I don't remember specifically what Celeste had, but I know, like, for example, when we played, what was that game called? We played a game, you and I, on one of our deep dive videos that allowed me to slow down the speed of the game all the way down to like 10%.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh my God, for a precision platformer, this was amazing because
it's the one where it was a platformer. It reminded me a little bit of Hyper Light Drifter, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
it had that
I forget what it was called. But
Yeah.
accessibility options like that go a really long way because they allow people that normally wouldn't be able to execute, especially if your game is execution based, right? There's some people that want to enjoy the game, they just don't have the dexterity to actually execute. They don't have the physical skill. And you have to make a decision as a designer whether you want to literally stop those people from experiencing your thing, or you want to add options in to allow them to experience it in a different way. And that's what real accessibility is about. Scorchbringer, that was it. And Celeste is famous for a lot of its accessibility settings, but I think anytime you can, my philosophy is that anytime you can allow people to change or modify your game experience to something that more suits their play style, I think that's a win because I think your player base is going to be larger because of it. And I think you're going to let people experience your game a little bit more. My biggest regret with Phylophobia is not having accessibility options because there's so many people that wanted to experience my thing and my story, and they couldn't do that because they couldn't get past section 2, which sucked.
This is you and I playing Scourgebringer, just for context of what you're talking about there.
Yeah, look at those two youngins.
At some point in this game, you can slow the entire game down. Is that what you're saying? All the enemies, all the thingies. I do remember you talking about that.
Yeah, I think it was after we kind of got into the game a little bit. But
I do remember we stayed on this, talking about this one screen. It's like, look how nice it is to jump. Like, look at all the particle effects. Look at the polish.
Yeah, it felt really solid though. This is like one of the games that stands out as far as character controller goes.
Yeah.
But totally, like being able to slow the game down was, excuse the pun, a game changer, because now even if I wasn't very good at the game, I totally could slow it down and play it kind of my speed and my style. Dark Souls is anti-accessibility. Yeah, there's a lot of debate around Dark Souls, right? Like I've seen that, and like I understand both sides. I understand a developer that really wants to give a pure experience for what they think the game should be, and they want people to experience the game in its purest form. I totally get that. It's also culturally become kind of a badge of honor to beat Dark Souls and kind of stuff. We lost Rick, but it's totally cool. I'm going to keep talking like nothing happened. So I totally understand that philosophy, but I also think, especially because we're talking about low brain power, right? There are several games that are high brain power or high execution, right? That I would like to play, but they require too much anxiety or thought or that kind of stuff for me. And therefore, I don't really think that they're worth playing for me. Now, if they did have accessibility options where I could kind of modify them a little bit, I'd totally be cool with, with playing them when I otherwise wouldn't. Like Dark Souls is a game I'll never play because I'm not about that kind of anxiety. And maybe that's okay. Maybe they could pick me up as a player if they allowed me to play the game a little bit differently.
So have you got me back?
You're back. Welcome back.
Hopefully, last time my thing froze, I lost all the chat. So we'll see if I keep all the chat. Apologies for that. Who knows?
Tim is a board gamer. No. What gave you that idea?
A board gamer.
What gave? No.
Yeah.
Not at all. I do want to say though, speaking of low brain power, one of the ways that you can actually reduce the cognitive load of your game is by making systems transparent. And that's one of the things that board games do very well, is they're very transparent in how their things work. They have to be, right? Because you have to move the pieces and do all the things yourself.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if a board game isn't transparent, you don't know how to play it. So you can learn a lot of design techniques from board games because their design is very transparent. Whereas in video games, it's very easy to be like, what happens when I shoot a character? Well, there's an 80% chance that he misses. And then if this other system is implemented, then he might reflect the bullets. And like all that happens behind the scenes and you don't really know. Whereas like in a board game, it's like flip a coin whether or not you're hit. So I know that I have a 50% chance and so on and so forth. So that transparency in design goes a long way with making games reduce cognitive load and stuff like that.
We have a question from Lenny. Do you think a low anxiety MMO is possible? Yeah, of course. I think you can have low anxiety MMO if you have it all very friendly. You can't die. I think that sort of game would be more of just experience the environment. Just run around and look at how beautiful everything is. That would be one way of doing that. It's not about I can get ganked out of nowhere. It's not about trying to level up quickly. It's not about going on raids together. It's just literally about let's just run around. This place is nice and it's peaceful. A little bit of a second life kind of. It's social interaction as opposed to trying to beat the game. I think that it's similar to say if it was a single player action adventure, it'd be the same kind of dynamic, I think, as to an MMO.
Totally. Yeah, I think one of the cool things that Destiny did when Destiny came out was private loot streams. And I don't know if any of you guys ever played Borderlands or even like not World of Warcraft, but a few other MMOs. When you beat a boss, it drops loot, and then you kind of gotta like you either take the loot or you like work out a deal with your friends of who gets what. And like that's so backwards on how I think it should be. And one of the things I loved about Destiny is the loot that drops is private to you. So your loot stream is private and their loot stream is private, and you both can get a really good drop from a boss. And I think that changes the dynamic from competitive to cooperative. It's not about like, especially if you're dealing with a bad actor, like a person that just is not a good buddy, they can take all this stuff. And I know I had a really bad experience in Borderlands because like the person I was playing with just kept stealing all the guns and giving me the hand-me-down guns, and I'm like, why am I playing this? This is stupid. I don't want to play this. You keep stealing all the guns. So
I think that's an interesting thing as well. If you're going to have some sort of competitive aspect when you're playing co-op, you need to make it clear what the rules are of that and not have it seem underhanded. So
for sure. Yeah, you have to align the incentives most of the time, right? And cooperative games should be 100% cooperative because it helps kind of collaborate. I loved the game Army of Two and some of those other like 2-player cooperative games because they really hone in on aspects that are cooperative together.
An Army of Two, if I remember correctly, there's no I get a score, you get a score. At the end, does it show you I killed this number, you killed that number, or is it just how far we both got
that's
together?
An old example. There's been a couple 2-player competitive games since then. What's the one with the 2 dudes in prison? I played that.
Yeah, I played that.
Then there's 2 brothers, and then there's like the new one from EA.
It Takes Two was another co-op one I played.
It Takes Two, yeah.
Cartoony one. It's A Way Out. No, that's the TV show.
I think A Way Out. I think that was it.
Is it A Way Out? What am I thinking? I think of Get Out. That movie. Have you seen that?
Yeah. That was really cool too, though, because like you needed the other person and you couldn't really go rogue. A lot of competitive
Way
or
out.
cooperative modes are kind of dropped into competitive games, and it's
Mm.
like you're basically playing a competitive game but with a friend. Whereas like these really cooperative games that we're starting to see design now are extra awesome because I love those kind of games because I'm all about cooperative games. And like I said, the anxiety, I think it's the anxiety of going against another person I really don't like. There's just no
Yeah.
incentive for me to battle another person. I just don't find enjoyment from that. So
I think as well, if it's, I mean, part of the reason that I am not excited about online multiplayer against people is that there's a certain investment you need to make in the game. You need to practice. And if you don't have the time to practice, then you're not going to be good at it. So I played Rocket League a bunch, and for a while I was just awful. Bronze League, just couldn't win. And then I took a time to watch some videos, try to learn the mechanics, do a bit of practice, and then I started to get better. And then I was playing online with my brother, and that was our way of hanging out, and we got better and better and better. So I got to the point where I was, feeling really good at the game and excited to play it. But that took hundreds of hours of playing and practice.
right.
And while I was doing that, I wasn't playing anything else. It was just like, here's my one game I'm going to invest in. I think when you jump into a new game that's got that online competitive aspect to it, you unless the game is very, very matchmaking and very generous with making you feel good, kind of a bit yuck to run around.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with what Rick is saying. I think we lost him again, but it's not a fun experience to be bad at something most of the time, right? So when people join multiplayer games that have people have hundreds and hundreds of hours into the game, and you join and you're just really bad at everything, it's not fun. But comparatively too to the types of games that I like, strategy games, when you play a game like not StarCraft, but Stellaris is what I'm talking about. That game takes hours long YouTube tutorials to learn. And so a lot of that kind of angst comes from learning the game itself versus like being good at the game. So there's games that are like easy to learn, hard to master. And then there's games that are like hard to learn, hard to master, I guess. And those have their own kind of challenges as well.
So if anyone has any questions for us in general about what we've talked about today, or about why my stupid internet keeps breaking, or about game development, any of those things, then please do throw them in the chat, and Tim and I will take 10 minutes or so now to answer those questions. There's a question here from Nacho and Hot Dog. Do you like Crusader Kings, Tim?
Do you know that I have it installed and I haven't played it? I have Crusader Kings, I think 3 installed, and I haven't played it. I keep meaning to because it looks like a game I would like. Generally, I like that exact type of game, but sci-fi-ish. But it seems like a game I would totally play, but I haven't played it yet.
I've talked about my love-hate with Crusader Kings. I'm pretty sure, let me just do a quick investigation of it to make sure I know if it's the one I'm talking about. But Crusader Kings, I played 2, not 3. I think 3's out just more recently. Yeah, I was terrible at it. It's so hard. I didn't know what I was doing. If this is, yeah, I mean, you have a look at some of the screenshots here. Let me just share the screen. Share the screen. So just Googled Crusader Kings and looking at the images. You've got this massive. It's a bit hard to see there, but I should probably be looking at the Steam page, shouldn't I? There we go. There's so much going on, and it's a medieval land conquest type thing. But if you have a look on here, there's just so much detail, so many decisions, so much context that for me, maybe it reflects more that I'm useless, but I had no idea what to do. And I've talked about this before. I spent a good hour or 2 watching videos and researching it, and I still didn't know what to do. I found that game just so difficult. But there's people out there that are like, I want that. I want it to be so difficult.
There's people that enjoy discovery and there's people that enjoy mastery, right? And the thing about multiplayer games is that journey of getting good is about mastery, right? And the journey of a game like this is about discovering the systems and understanding how they work. And I think I'm definitely more on the spectrum of discovery. I like learning. I like figuring things out and putting things together.
Pretty much, Lottie. Like my job
Rick
here is
keeps making
done.
good points
Outta
and then
here.
leaving.
I keep unplugging my internet so Tim has a chance to speak because I tend to
Keep
just talk and talk and talk.
I keep having to finish Rick's points with hoping I know where he was going with that.
We're like that old married couple where I'm like, you know what? There's a really good coffee shop, and you jump in. They make great bagels. I'm like, I was gonna say that. Oh, come on. I was gonna say that. Okay. What else we got here in terms of questions?
Turtle Tipper says, I think the problem that Fortnite ended up having, they had a very high skill ceiling. So new players ended up getting destroyed by the players that had practice building. Yeah, and you know how they solved this actually. They your first few rounds, they would make you play bots. Make it easy. And so yeah, that's obviously a problem, right? You can't drop a new player into a bunch of highly skilled players because then they quit. So
there's also a massive problem with indie game developers making online games, online multiplayer games, if you don't have enough traffic. So if you look at, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry, I've got that.
bless you.
I hate that when you get 10 seconds of warning. You're like, no. But I would say as an indie game developer, if you're in the early days, if you haven't already made a couple of games, if you don't have a publisher backing you, if you don't have a big team, absolutely, under no circumstances should you make an online multiplayer game that requires someone else to be there to play your game. And so we were talking with Stefan, who goes by Infenzia as his YouTube channel, and this was a while ago. He was on our live cast and talking about his game Line War that they've launched, and it's just player versus player. There's no AI, there's no computer to play against. They prioritize co-op. Sorry, they prioritize one versus one multiplayer. And I liked the game a lot, but I'd go online to play. There'd be no one there, and if I did play against someone, it'd be random. Are they amazing? Are they terrible? So until you've got enough people, you can't get your matchmaking algorithm to allow you to have a good game. So it's really, really difficult to get that momentum. If you come along, you don't have a good game, you don't come back. So you can't kind of get that wave of momentum.
Yeah.
So that's why whenever I hear people saying, oh, we're going to make online multiplayer as an indie, like, be really careful about that.
It's dangerous because it's a chicken and egg problem for sure. Like, you have to make a good game to attract people, but you have to have people to have a good game. So you really have to understand your stuff, and you can make the best game ever and just not get lucky and not have a big player count, and people won't play it.
Yeah. Or you make a game where you start off with single player, and if people love it, they're like, this is amazing, we demand a multiplayer. Where is the multiplayer? How dare you not give us multiplayer? Then if you've got a player base, then they're ready for it. But if you start off just with multiplayer, then you might not give people an opportunity to fall in love with the game and then start demanding those things.
You know what was interesting is Avocado Fire brought up Titanfall 2 campaign. So Titanfall was a multiplayer game that did launch with no single player at all. And it was a launch title and people loved it and it was awesome. But the biggest complaint was, where's the single player? And then Titanfall 2 came out with one of the best campaigns I've ever played. Like, I think it was better than some of the Halo games. It was just fantastic. And nobody played it. Like, hardly anybody played it. And they're like, oh, multiplayer is better. We're fine. So listening to people isn't always the best option either.
So there's a question, Tim, about do we have any game design books we recommend? I'm just going to briefly share my screen, although every time I've done this, things have crashed, so or my internet's gone down. So The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell.
$220.
Well, that's Australian. Oh, 200. Yeah, that's Australian dollars. In US dollars, that'd be like 150. But that's a lot of dollars for a book.
This book is very expensive, though. I will say one of the things I love is if they have an app. It's called The Art of Game Design, Book of Lenses. It's an app, and it's got all the lenses from the book, but in an app form, so you can kind of flip through them.
Right. Yeah, but this for me is, it's a really insightful read. It's not just about here's a mechanic to make something interesting. It talks about the player experience. It talks about I think a lot of the philosophy and a lot of the mentality and the psychology of game design, not just here are some techniques. So I think it's a really good way to change the whole way you look at game design.
Totally. And the app is a really good reference tool for me too. whenever I have a new game design idea I'm thinking of, I pull up the different lenses and kind of think through things through some of those lenses, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Good.
What other questions you guys got for us? What do you got today? Tim's looking on his bookshelf over there. Let's see what.
There's a book I have called Actionable Gamification, which is a self-published book by this guy named Yukai Chow, and it is actually for businesses on how to gamify their businesses. But it is the most comprehensive like game design book that I've ever read. It's just filled with all these different, it's got these tactical techniques of where a book of lenses is very much an abstract, like a way to look at things. This is a book filled with just like ideas of stuff, like badges and leaderboards and points and like how they interact with stuff and all that stuff. And so it's not a game design book per se, but I pull it up all the time. I think it's really awesome.
Nice. Yeah. It's interesting. You and I have talked about this a lot, Tim, that I think sometimes a lot of the skill of being an expert in your craft comes from just being immersed in it for years and years and years and absorbing it. And absorbing it, but also paying attention to it. So people who are amazing movie buffs, they're really studying it. They're looking at it. Look at the way, De Niro says things that way. Look at the way Scorsese positions the camera that way. Compare it to the old classics. My internet's bouncing again. And so they're really paying attention to those elements rather than just sitting there and saying, oh, that was a good movie. And I think it's the same with games, that if you want to be a good game designer, you can't just play the game. You have to try to understand the game and feel the game. And so this is why I like games like Limbo. Limbo, that's the little kid running across the screen one. Yeah. That when you play it, if you're just like, okay, that's cool. How do I win? Where's the boss? Beat the boss. Great. Then you're not absorbing it. But if you get there and say, right in this moment, when I first fire it up, how do I feel? What are they doing with the colors? And how fast does the player move? So if you're always paying attention to that as you play the game, you're listening to yourself and your response, then I think it's going to give you that intuition to be a better game designer. And then as you move forward, you can just sort of feel what works right, particularly with polish and tuning and stuff.
Yeah. I think looking at yourself like a student as well of like game design in general and how things work, I think is really important. I have become fascinated with systems and how games work and what makes them work and all that type of stuff too. So even when we're not here, on a live cast, I'm constantly studying things like that.
So this looks like originally a question from 222 Abel Velo. Can you guys do it? But also retweeted, as the case might be. Can you guys do a whole stream on how to plan and make a game design document or game plan? Well, there's going to be a controversial answer. I'll give my blurb first, and then Tim can. I think Tim and I are aligned on this, but he can give you his opinion. I worked in big studios, and I was responsible for creating the game design document. And we had to give the game design document to the publisher, and then the publisher would look at it and say, yes, we'll give you a bunch of money. And then they would come along 2 months later and say, did you do the things in the game design document? And we followed that path, which is a very traditional old school way of making games. And it had a purpose because when you've got 100 people, you don't want someone getting there and changing their mind midway through a thing. So, artists and designers and programmers are all trying to march to the beat of the same drum. And so it's really important to have a game design document. As an indie game developer, I would recommend not making a game design document. To get in there and have your prototype be your game design document. So fire up the engine and say, what would be cool? I'm just going to try to make that. I'm going to try to make it as quick and as dirty and as fundamental as possible. And is that interesting? Is that compelling? And then my game design document is going to be a backlog of features or ideas where I say, I want to have some sort of leaderboard. And that's it. You just write down leaderboard. You don't need 3 pages of how's the leaderboard going to look and what's the UI and what's the layout and how's it going to hook to things. You might say, I want to have a triple jump if you pick up a power up. And so in a game design document, you might need to say, what are the power ups? I'm going to list all the power ups. What are their abilities? How do you get them? How do you proceed? And then I'm going to have, single jump. How high do you jump? Double jump. How high? What are the rules? What's the timing? So I write it all down. In my opinion, as an indie game developer, the better way of doing it is saying, it'd be cool, a triple jump. So I'm just going to put a little cube on the ground that I'm not going to hook up my power-up system yet, and my pickup system. I'm just going to have a cube. When I run through that, it's going to trigger the ability to do a triple jump. I'm gonna go jump, jump, jump. Is that fun? Yes, done. So that would be my feeling. Doesn't help you if you're saying, but Rick, I want to get a job as a game designer in a big studio. But it helps you if you're saying, I'm an indie game developer wanting to make good games. Don't get weighed down by a game design document. Jot down ideas so you don't forget them, but you don't have to go and execute them based upon a specific written plan. How does that match with what you think, Tim?
Rick, I think my kind of process, I would make a slight modification on kind of what you do. So I think in terms, I've made a few games now to where I think in terms of kind of prototyping and production and then all of that stuff. So I think the prototyping phase for me is very much no documents, put stuff together, figure stuff out, see what the triple jump feels like, all that stuff. Once I've got a good prototype that I think I'd like to spend the next year or two of my life making and taking to Steam or something like that, I would then consider myself going into production. And I used to say game design documents are absolutely useless and you should never use them. However, I have noticed that on that year or two journey, you can get lost a little bit. You can get lost and you can add stuff and you can scope creep and you can forget what made the game magical and add stuff you don't need. So I think you need some kind of document to keep you grounded on what you're making.
Yep.
And I think the perfect time to do that is after the prototype, before the production. And a while back, I made a video. Let me share this on a game design document template that I made, and I can share this in the chat for you guys. But this is a one-page game design document template. It's not a traditional game design doc in the fact that it covers every aspect of the game, but it's just kind of got what like a single sentence description of what your game is, like 3 design pillars, like 3 words or phrases that want to kind of cover what your game should be, a summary of the story or mechanics, a few features, interface, art style, music, and this will probably end up being 2 or 3 pages once you fill it all out, and then some milestones. And then this would be kind of I called it a one-page game design document template, but really this kind of is my grounding document. So this is like the document that I keep, and when 2 years down the line, when I'm like, oh, should I add multiplayer? I go back to this and I'm like, okay, it's not part of the core game that I was trying to create. And this kind of keeps my whole thing consistent a little bit, So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
gonna
really
share the link
interesting.
to this.
It's cool you showed that. That for me is more of a concept document. And again, in more of a big studio philosophy, you would have to have that first before you even, like, that's when you were talking to a publisher and saying, okay,
Right.
we've got this idea. And so you have that, the idea is here's what you're going to do. Here's going to be the main mechanics, etc. So it's more in the pitch stage. It's what I really like of what you said is that reminder. Here's my vision. Here's me staying on track. And I think that's different to what a lot of people think they need out of a game design document. They think they need the 100 pages of rules, of information, of exactly how it's going to work. I think you and I are consistent in saying you don't need the 100-page thing, but what you do need is some list in priority, which is a little bit more of a an agile way of thinking about it. What's my most important feature? Then what's my next most important thing? What's my next most important thing? And I would have mood boards, and I would have reference art, and I would have a list of competitive games I've looked at, and I would be able to say, okay, I really like the jump from that, and I really like the whatever from this and whatever from that. I don't, maybe that's the modern game design document, is a collection of reference material and ideas and reminders and checklists. So maybe there is a validity. It just needs a different name, because for me, game design document brings that kind of like, it's rigid. That's my problem with it.
100%. It's waterfall versus agile, right? Like it's very much, I'm going to plan out everything from the beginning versus I'm going to plan it out like 2 weeks at a time and kind of see what I'm iterating on. And I don't think games can be built like that. I really don't. I think for bigger teams, you definitely need some kind of like documents to make sure everybody's on the same page, right? But especially for indies, especially for teams of 2 and 3, you're way better off kind of taking it as you go. But you do need something to kind of keep you grounded, because the kind of the downfall of an agile kind of iterative approach is that you can iterate anywhere in any direction. You can balloon up. You can end up with all kinds of crazy stuff. So keeping somewhere focused direction, I think, is important.
And Avocado Fire has kind of shown me up to be a little bit not insincere, but incongruous with what I was saying. So the RPG course that we created, I actually teach how to create a design document, and we're going through the, who are the characters, what's the story, the enemies, etc. And I think that for me is, RPG is a gigantic game, so you want to know you've got it figured out. Any game where you've got some story, you probably want to write down the story, the main characters, so you're jotting these things down. And so I should be a little bit cautious with you don't need a GDD ever, because there are times where you do. It's very important to write it down. My prophetic warning is a little bit more of, don't get stuck with it, don't get blocked by it, don't allow that to stop you. Don't do that first, I think, is my main concern. Prototype first.
Totally.
Cool, good. Look at that. I'm having a little debate with myself. Present day Rick versus previous day Rick. Any other questions that we've got for today? One pager is good.
Game design document helps me prevent scope creep. Yeah, and that's why I'm generally a fan of, documents that can kind of keep you on the right track without restricting the details, because there's so many details that come up. Some of the best things I've made in games are like random ideas on Tuesdays at 2 a.m. Boom.
Yeah. Write it down. Absolutely, write your ideas down. But yes, so maybe what's the terminology? Maybe it's an idea collection. Maybe it's an idea collection or rules for development, like rules for production, is different to a game design document where you're trying to Okay, I'm going around in circles here, but the main problem I have is I don't think you can 100% design something on paper. I think you have to design it in the engine with your hands. You have to feel it. So game design documents get very rigid in terms of, but I said the enemy did this. Where is that in the game? You design thinking or document or list can say, I'm going to have, enemies. How many? I don't need to know yet. I need to see what's going to be fun in my game. What are they going to do? I don't know. I need to see what's fun in the game. But maybe the document can say you'll have enemies, and all the enemies, can hurt the player.
Right. Or like the game has 5 different sections, right? But then what's in those sections, you got to be iterative to find out what enemies or fun things make sense for the snow level, right?
Question from Man. How do you, I see, Manview's got it. How do you decide if adding to the GDD is going to overdo the scope versus adding value to the game? Does that make sense? Yes, it does. So, the scope, do I need this feature in my game? And how do you approach that, Tim? If you've got the, do I need this thing? Is it going to make the game better or just take more time?
I very much have an agile approach to things, because I think you don't really know. And the less experienced you are, the worse this is, right? You're like, oh, adding 5 levels is not going to be that big of a deal. And an experienced developer and or artist might say, okay, well, are the 5 levels completely different scenes, right? Are they going to require completely different models and atmospheric conditions and particles and all that? So you can't, I would very much kind of plan out the big stroking kind of sweeps of stuff, the bigger details, and then all of the finite individual details you kind of have to take as you go. This is another reason why generally we advise to make like an MVP, minimum viable product, or minimum viable game, or vertical slice of your game, because then you can kind of iron out all those little decisions and all the things that you're not really sure about, and you understand the scope of how much work that took you. So then you can extrapolate that out over time. So if it took you, 6 months to make this version of the game with all the details and all the details in the level and all that stuff, it might take you another 3 months for each other section, right? Because one, you have less to build, but also you understand the scope of what you're creating. So I generally, anything specific and large, I don't think belongs in a design document, at least for an indie design document, right? And anything specific and small is really hard to quantify, and it may not even be necessary through iteration. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, but yeah, I don't think you can realistically effectively.
A comment, Tech Dave. This is one of the better streams. Thanks. Cool. Thank you for pointing out.
All our other streams are bad.
Yeah, the other ones are crap. This one's passable. Wonderful. So, any last couple of questions here? It's always cool talking about design. One thing I'd love to do, Tim, at some point was with you and me, and maybe we get a couple of, leading awesome dudes in the industry to come along and do a 2-day workshop on game design and really look at how you improve your skills, how you go from being a bit of a programmer who can make some things happen to delighting players, having something that can stand out and be amazing.
Yeah,
Be really interested to explore that.
I
Maybe
am
someday, one day.
100% into game design. I really I enjoy learning about it from like a student perspective. I study it. I watch all kinds of YouTube videos. I read all kinds of books. I experiment with games. I open up games just to like test them and mess with systems and see how they work. So I'd love to do something like that.
Yep. Cool. What else do you guys want to? You guys should write a book. Yes, in our spare time. What is your? I don't know. We haven't had this one for a few weeks, Tim. So, what is your prefer game engine? Sorry to tease you about your typo there, but that is actually. You know what? If you don't mind, David, I'm going to use that as our way of framing the Unity versus Unreal versus Godot versus Construct versus Scratch versus
everything in assembly
everything else.
from the ground up.
Your prefer game engine. So, Tim, what's your and I'm using that because I think it's a fun word.
I'm in between game engines at the moment,
and
so therefore I don't have loyalty to any specific one. But I really like the capabilities of Godot lately. I think Construct 3 is really simple and really easy to use, and maybe that's just years of experience on it. I don't know. I think it's really easy to make prototype stuff with. I think Godot is really up and coming. It's especially with Godot 4. There's a lot of powerful stuff, so I'm excited about Godot.
Yeah. Oh, the lights come out. My green screen's getting worse. Sorry, apologies for my awful green screening today. Seriously, this app doesn't like me. Yeah, you know what? I've thought about this and I keep refining my answer to it. It used to be, oh, I don't know, it doesn't really matter, do whatever, take a couple of weeks learning each and then see which one fits you. But I think each of them has a brand. And I would say go and find the one that their brand matches your brand. And a little bit of this came from the conversation we're having when Unity was doing a couple of dumb things a month or two ago and people were getting upset about it. It was because there was a disconnect between, well, this is who I am and this is what I thought Unity was. And they're letting me down with their corporate decisions or with their branding. So I think if you look at what Unity stands for, it's more of the, scrappy, do anything, indie games, it's a little bit rough around the edges, but it can do anything you want to do. Whereas Unreal's a bit more slick, a bit more first-person shooter, a bit more AAA. Godot is the stick it to the man where, we're free and open source, I don't know, free and for everyone and all that kind of stuff. So, and then whereas something more like Construct 3 is more sort of accessible, friendly for everyone, more 2D focused. So I think look at the brand of the engines and then say, well, which one am I? If I'm a hardcore AAA person, then I'm an Unreal guy or gal. If you're more of the scrappy indie, I like mobile and small fun games, but the ability to just do anything and the one that's got the most people playing it or using it, I'm a Unity person.
Yeah. I think that's a good description. I think different things mean different parts of stuff means different things to people. And I think some people that open source part is really important. Some people the massive customer adoption is really important, right? So, and some people the allure of AAA graphics is really important. So, depending on what's important to you, pick that one.
There's been a couple of Godot or Godot or Godot or however we want to pronounce the dang engine. There's been a couple of questions about as in, oh no, here they come.
Here they come.
Hung around too long, Tim. If you hang around for long enough, you get spam bots in your chat. Don't look, everyone. Kids, don't look. Don't click on the link. Don't.
I've featured them before by accident. You just click on them to show.
By accident. Yeah, we've been waiting for Godot 4 to fully launch so that we can then create a course that's in the the latest and greatest. That's sort of the essence of it. And
I keep
also
bothering
looking
Rick
for
about
someone
it.
who might be interested in teaming up with us as a Godot instructor. So if you've got a little bit of an interest in being an instructor and you think GameDev.tv are all right, and you kind of think Godot's not too bad, then
And you think this
hit
is
us
our
up.
best stream yet? You know?
Who else is saying that? Did someone else say that? Best stream yet?
No, but Gary did say this, so Gary's okay in my book.
Oh, I see. Does that mean Gary's volunteering to create a Godot course? That's what I'm smelling out of that. He's like, oh, I'm a Unity guy. How dare you even suggest this?
Maybe Godot is higher brain power than Super Auto Pets, though.
Godot,
Yeah, 3.5 is released, and there's a beta 4 right now. So if you want to try to...
It's all about the
Well, no, it's still an alpha.
number. The first number needs to be
Beta 4 is about to come out, I think. I should double check that.
It's been about to come out for a year. This is...
it's Alpha 4, though.
Oh, Alpha 4.
Yeah.
Sounds like a strike team.
Alpha
Beta
4.
4. Cover for Alpha 4. We're always bailing out Alpha 4.
Mayday, mayday, this is Alpha 4.
Gamma 2 is in trouble. Okay. How do you guys typically avoid feature creep? We've talked about feature creep a lot in other streams. Like we've had whole streams to do with feature creepy type stuff. What's our 2-sentence summary on how to avoid feature creep?
When feature creep comes in my door, I beat him with a bat. That's what I do. I think feature creep along with scope creep can be avoided by knowing what you're making. And I think everything we talked about with the design document stuff and the game design pillars and the game identity and all that can really help you avoid those things by knowing what you're trying to achieve. I think the problem with scope creep is that what you're trying to achieve changes over time. And if you don't write it down somewhere, it just, you forget that you're making an RPG. Now you're making an MMORPG. Now you're making an MMORPG that's going to be on 7 platforms. And you got to really understand kind of what specifically you're making.
Sorry. Just thought that was good. A little bit of banter amongst the crew there. Okay, cool. Tim, I think we've answered a couple of questions, and apparently we've had a good stream, better than usual. Normally, what was the comment before? Normally you guys suck, but this time you've been passable. I think that was what I read.
I think that word for word, I think that's what they said. Yeah,
that was my interpretation of it anyway. So, as always, really very... what's the right word here? Thankful, very grateful that you guys have come and joined us today to listen to Tim and I talk. We're here to serve you and to hopefully improve your game development journey and have you make awesome games. And you know what? This is our thing. This is our tribe. This is what we do. Everyone needs a place to belong. So it makes us feel very special that we get to belong with all of you guys and gals who are out there and theys who are out there making indie games and thinking about indie games and just generally working on game type stuff. So Tim, lovely hanging with you as always. Thank you for your awesomeness. Thank you for showing us a high brain power game disguised as a low brain power game.
Not according to Gary.
Oh, Gary.
Who's
this
welcome.
Gary guy? I don't know. Doesn't sound trustworthy.
Thank you for showing us a game where you're a pig and you beat the bacon out of other people.
No worries. Beat the bacon out of them. That's a good thing as well. I've learned a couple of things today.
Let's double click on that.
Out of that guy.
All right, lovely people.
Internet's going crazy again. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we will catch you all same time next week at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States of Florida. I think is
on Tuesdays. United States of Florida.
United States of Florida.
Bye, everybody.
America. See ya.